What's up, Angelica? Oh my gosh, I love your
I
shirt.
love it. I was just gonna say that. We were both wearing patterns. Love it. Happy
This is
Wednesday, everyone.
this is what my son, my 5-year-old, calls the electric jellyfish shirt.
Nice. I love
Obviously.
that. It does look like a little bit jellyfish because it's like blue or like flowers. I can't really tell. I'm also wearing flowers too.
Man, love
Um,
it. Love it.
well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll give a folks a couple more minutes to trickle in. I love seeing everyone's location, and there's a lot of Canadians. So represent Canada. I'm from Vancouver too, so it's great to see there's folks from Toronto, Halifax, Vancouver, and someone from Copenhagen. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, Copenhagen? That's rad.
Yeah, that is rad.
Are
I
you
wonder what the time zone is for that.
are you in Toronto right now or are you still in Van?
I'm in the West Coast, so same time zone as you, Pete.
Lovely. Nice.
Yep. So as folks trickle in and continue adding in your city, we'd love to see where you're calling in from. I love to start off with a fun icebreaker. So
hmm
Pete, with a couple weeks of summer left, do you have any fun summer activities left to do with your family?
Yeah, ish. We were gonna go to the mountains and then there was like a board meeting that
Oof.
had to happen. Well, it was already scheduled. It was like bad scheduling on my part. But my son's going into kindergarten right now, Mikey,
Nice.
and so like he has like 2 weeks off between his like last camp and then like his last summer camp and then school starting. So instead, I think we're just gonna like pop up to Napa and which we've got like a hotel that we like to go to. It's literally it's just like the pool. Like all he wants to do is like hang out in the pool all day long. And so I hang out next to him, or sorry, like nearby in a cabana, and I do email, which is my favorite
Okay.
video game.
You don't go to the wineries, or does the wife go to the wineries and you check, you like hang out in the pool?
We just like all hang out in the pool, and I do email
That's
and
awesome.
like go into the pool and like do email, and then go in the pool and do email. So just like back and forth. It's like it's like circuit training,
I was
right?
gonna say, is it that like the spa where you go hot, cold, hot, cold?
Right. The dorkiest spa ever.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, let's get started because we have amazing content that I know folks want to dive
I'm
in.
pumped.
We're
This is a
so pumped. This is going
fun,
to be a
yeah.
good one.
This is a fun topic, right? Because like yeah, early stage is like chaos, and so like bringing order to chaos is like its own little kind of like fun little bag of tricks.
I'm so excited to dive into this. So, how to scale your revenue org from your first hire to 20 plus reps with the one and only Pete Kazany, co founder and CRO at Atrium. But before we dive in, again, I would love to chat about Modern Sales Pros. So today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. I'm one of the community event managers there. And for those
Woohoo!
who are you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operation, sales development, and the related supported disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 27K and growing members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them through C corners they might not know about. And we do that through great sessions like the one you are about to experience today, through our online bus forum and in-person events now that that's coming back. And for
Mhm.
those who aren't previously admitted, you'll have access to community at the end of the event. And also don't hesitate to drop our team a note at modernsaleshq.com.
I think Angelica, there was something missing there. It's you are one of our lovely community events managers,
Oh,
right?
thank you.
Love one of our lovely community events managers.
Thanks, Pete. And of course, let's talk about housekeeping. If you have questions
Mhm.
for Pete, definitely use the Q&A function in the top right-hand corner. Ask your questions to Pete, and we'll be sure to answer them live. And of course, this event is being recorded. So if you have colleagues or friends that missed it and want to see it, we'll send the recording at the end of the day, and it's also be located in the MSP previous event page at the end of the day. And
Wonderful.
now, last but not least,
That
I'm going to
event,
pass it on. Oh,
that previous event page is like bananas. There's so much rad stuff on there. It's like
yeah.
it's absolutely nuts.
And
Yeah,
you can
it's awesome.
also, for those who are not familiar with our website, definitely check out the content track. You can look at Guide to Crushing Quota. You can also check out all the Atrium events all in one place at the
Mhm.
data-driven sales management content page. I'll drop that link there after I talk about our awesome sponsor today, which I'm actually going to pass it off to Pete to talk about
Word.
Atrium and about himself, and I'll come back for closing remarks. Take it away, Pete.
One Wonderful. Thanks, Angelica. You're the best. Hey, folks. Yeah. So, just like Atrium is a sponsor of this MSP event today. For folks who are not familiar with Atrium, we make what we call data-driven sales management software. And so, literally, what it exists to do is to help managers use data to improve team performance. So, like AE managers, SDR managers, sales leaders, et cetera, like people who are responsible for people. It helps them use metrics and data to improve the performance of their reps and their teams and so on and so forth. And the way um, and one of the cool things about that is it's like super easy to set up. It takes like 3 minutes to turn on an Atrium account. You just throw a read-only connection to your Salesforce instance. You go through a kind of little wizard, and then like poof, you've got a world-class metrics harness that is being monitored for you to kind of help you understand like where there's areas for improvement, where people are kicking butt, and why, and essentially just like infuse your sales organization with like data-driven awesome sauce. So that's the kind of little bit of a little bit of context there for y'all. So a little bit of background on me. That's my old headshot back when there was like 10 pounds less Pete and a lot more hair. Kind of a little background is that I'm the founder of Atrium, and where I kind of I'm founder and CRO of Atrium, where I started getting into sales stuff was at my last software company, Talentbin, which is a recruiting software company. It was founded in 2010, and so I went from being a business generalist founder, realized like, hey, I guess software doesn't sell itself. That's kind of interesting. I guess who's going to sell this? Oh, that's your job, Pete. Oh, okay, cool. So I went from being our first rep to our first manager, and then our like VP of sales. We were eventually acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. Had about like 20, the sales organization was around like 40 folks or so, like 20 sellers, 20 CS reps. Acquired by Monster, where I was responsible for new product sales. Um, you know, 1,000-person sales organization, a little bit of a different experience there. But like this kind of just got me going on like sales excellence, data-driven sales management, operational excellence, all those sort of things. Ended up writing a book on startup sales, founding sales here, as well, and then eventually founded Atrium in 2016. And so that's a little bit of a kind of context on me. So I think a little bit about sales excellence, just a little bit. Um, and so what actually on the topic of founding sales, if folks are interested in getting a copy of founding sales, it's like it's a pretty meaty little book here. It's like a reference guide, right? Like all the things they need to do at different stages of like your go to market from $0 to $10 million, like 10 million ARR. Happy to give you guys a copy. Just go ahead. I think we're going to drop a link to the sign up page, and then also we'll get you hooked up with a Coffees for Closers Yeti mug as well, because obviously who doesn't love a Yeti mug, and also who doesn't love a sales joke? We all love sales jokes. So you can hit that hyperlink there, or alternatively you can just like take a picture of the QR code there, and we'll get you hooked up. Wonderful. So what we are going to talk about today is scaling, right? But importantly, like scaling from first hire to like 20-ish reps. So we're not going to be talking about like 40 or like 80 or like 200 or whatever, because there's different problems that need to be addressed at different stages of an organization. And so we're going to be talking about kind of like that earlier stage piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen here, so it's a little bit easier for me to kind of like throw things out to folks. All right, cool. There we go. And kind of call things out. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about scaling stuff, right? Which will be super fun. So one of the things that in an early stage environment, and this can apply like if there's founders in the audience or early state sales leaders, right, who are coming in after a founder-led selling situation. One of the things that we're changing a little bit is that oftentimes founders are kind of like confused as to why sales is really important, like why they need a sales organization, right? And if you think about it, this is largely because of like as sellers or sales leaders or whatever, we have a lot of experience having been SDRs or AEs or whatever and kind of like come through the ranks. If you think about where founders come from, they come from product management or consulting or engineering or fill in the blank. We're seeing more and more seller founders, which is kind of cool. Like Ross Rich from Accord, Justin Dignelli from Pace. There's more and more of these folks, which is great, but that's less of the common case. And so as a result, folks are kind of like less familiar with how important it is to have sales excellence in an organization. And so you kind of see this where you get a little bit of people being like, oh, well, like people will just like buy this on their own, right? Like, hey, we'll just like publish documentation and people will buy, right? Or, oh, we don't have salespeople, right? And so the problem with this is that it's like what I call seductive yet crappy anti-patterns, because you can tell yourself like, oh yeah, we don't have salespeople, people just buy on their own. Doesn't work, right? Doesn't work. And bad things come out of it. And so if the funny thing about this, and actually these screenshots are pretty old, so I need to like refresh them. Like the organizations that say that they don't have salespeople, they have salespeople. They have a lot of salespeople. Right? Maybe let's call them different things. Like Palantir, calls them business development reps, or Slack calls them, etc. And so the problem is that what you need to do there is like just recognize that this is really important, and commit to it, right? And so oftentimes what can happen is that when you don't have people who are focused on, who are not focused on this, or don't realize the importance of this, then you can end up with like really bad kind of outcomes coming out of that, right? So like for instance, hire a new sales leader to kind of like figure it out because we haven't figured it out ourselves, and then that person's going to be gone because in 6 to 12 months because things haven't been figured out for them. Or alternatively, like selling to all of your batchmates, which is something that's like not great. And so what we're going to talk about here a little bit is like there's like implications of this confusion and why it's important to like realize that this is really important. This is a Twitter conversation that I had with someone. This is quite a bit ago, but essentially it was somebody who's like, oh man, I can't believe people do outbound sales. It's so annoying. Geez. And my response to that was like, well, like Yelp and and group at the time, you can tell how like this is characterized. Like Yelp kind of does this and Grubhub does this, and like they're really important companies. How are you going to market? Oh, we like referrals. Well, of course, everybody like, yeah, everybody likes referrals, like of course, but like you can't be the only thing there. And so unfortunately this company died. And if you look at the market caps of the organizations that like actually have their act together in this regard, those are the ones who are like world crushing and what have you. Same thing with kind of like less rigorous, what I call sloppy growth, instead of being operationally excellent and like data driven, instead getting out over your skis and like overscaling too rapidly, and breaking your company in the meantime. And so the reason why oftentimes people kind of like get a little bit of confused around this is because they don't realize that early stage is like a stepwise process. They think that it's kind of like up and to the right growth all the way, right? And then it's like what calling smooth value creation over time here. And so that's actually not how it works in early stage organizations. And you understand why people think this, because you think about kind of things like this, like, oh, like that's how the stock grows and what have you. But the reality is that like in an early stage environment, like we're down here, right, all the way down at the bottom, at like early in time, if you will. And so if you like zoom in here, what ends up happening is you can see that it's actually a series of step functions here, right? And so instead, what I call these business motion inflection points. Oh, that's lovely that I'm getting logged out here. Sorry guys, I've got to log back in here. I guess my security here. You guys are gonna be able to see me doing one password here. That's annoying. All right. And we should be back. Beep. Don't worry, we'll cut that out in post-processing. So what they say, we'll fix it in post. Cool. We have these business motion inflection points. And so the important thing about these is like these are after each of these steps, the organization is more valuable because you figured out something new. Right? You figured out how to better turn, salary expense or value like into value. And so these are kind of the steps here. Do we know what problem we're solving? And then it's like grind, 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 grind. Yes, we do know what problem we're solving. People have it. Sweet. Bing. Right? More valuable. Okay. Does like the product actually work? No, it's crappy and buggy and like grind, 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 grind. Oh, yes, it does work. It delivers the thing that people want, right? Bing, right? So now we're at like more valuable. Okay, will someone pay? Grind, 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 grind. This is us figuring out the sales motion, right? Pricing and packaging the sales motion. Yes, someone will pay. Okay, will many people pay? And so that's essentially like it's a bunch of steps here. So like, do we know what problem we're solving? Does it actually work? Will someone pay? Will many people pay? Can non-founders sell this? It's an important stage here, right? And then can we build a mini sales team? Can like a bunch of non-founders sell this? And then, hey, can we max out this small sales org? And so one of the things that's really powerful here is that a bunch of like it's kind of like these stages are not necessarily created equal. Because what can happen is when you unlock certain pieces, that's where like real scale can happen. So for instance, once you can prove that a non-founder can sell this, then we can hire a bunch of non-founders and they can all sell it, right? And so that allows us to scale out, which of course then drives ARR, drives ARR growth there. And so these are the different steps here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk through, I'm going to spin really quickly through some of these early ones here. I'm not going to get into them too deep because ideally these have already been done by the point in time at which like a sales leader shows up or like a seller shows up. If they haven't, the hair on your back of your neck should stand up a little bit, and you might see this in the form of like, not amazing win rates and and kind of like inconsistency, or maybe things are winning but like they're churning, or you have low engagement. But point is that we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about these sections in more detail, but I'm kind of going to like spin through these just so everyone kind of understands what's going on. So cool. First step, hey, what problem are we solving? This is what's traditionally known as customer development. What you're trying to do is you're trying to validate the pain points in the market that can be solved by the application of your technology. The important thing to do here is like you want to be engaging with potential customers and validating that you've got that they actually have this pain point that you think that they have, right? You can't just assume that they have the pain point that that you think they have, even if it's something that like you've encountered yourself and you're like, oh man, like I'm really annoyed by XYZ or frustrated by XYZ. The important thing is that you need to validate that they have these problems, A, and then B, you need to validate like that the existing solutions are kind of insufficient. Kind of exit criteria associated with this was like when you get enough people being like, yeah, I do have that problem, and yeah, the existing solutions are like really not great, then you've de-risked a little bit. You know that there might be a reason why you should you should invest engineering resources going after that. Usually what this is like a business or a technical founder kind of doing, this is an org chart, even though it just looks like a big gray box, right? Where the business founder is doing both like the lead gen and then also doing this interviewing and documentation stuff. The next step is what I call existence proof of value creation. So the important thing here is, hey, we've put together this minimum viable product, we put together this product in order to solve the problem that we validated here in kind of step one. Wonderful. Does it actually solve the problem? Right? Does it impact the metrics that we're looking to do? Like, I don't know, say you're talking about like you're making new mutual plan, kind of like collaborative selling software. Do the reps use it? Is it usable? Does it actually positively impact their win rates? as an example. These are the KPIs that you'd want to track to make sure that actually it's the thing that you're doing is actually solving the problem in question. Again, this is and so what that typically involves is like deploying to like alpha or beta customers there. Maybe you're charging them, maybe you're not. But importantly, what you're doing is you're like bird dogging the hell out of making sure that they are that they're using it, and then also you're documenting that like the value is being created there. And again, this is like largely being done by an individual founder. Then the next step is like, once we know that we've created this magical thing that actually does positively impact those win rates, right? So like someone you have successfully solved the problem using a unique application of technology. Well, now what we need to do, like, and that value is being created. Now what we need to do is harvest some of that value back for us, and we do that by charging, right? And so in this case, like this is where the sales motion is being kind of like is starting to be developed, right? We're starting to figure out how we're going to price this thing, how we're going to package it. Like, are we going to do this on a per seat basis? Is it a usage based model? Is it, fill in the blank? How is it priced? How do we talk about it? Right? How do it like, what is the ICP of the customers for whom this really, 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 really resonates? Like, these are the things that we're going to be figuring out here, where in order for us to exchange money for the value that's being created here. And again, this is something that usually the individual founder is doing here. This is where I'll start kind of like talking about anti-patterns a little bit here. This is where people can kind of like get tripped up through like some of those anti-patterns. Like, so in this case, you might say, oh, okay, I built this product, I'm going to get somebody else to sell it, right? And then, bad things happen. So this is why the business founder should be the one doing this. So then once you have that existence proof, then what we do is we start moving into like, okay, cool, now we're going to do like iterations of this, like multiple iterations of this. And the reason to do that is like, yeah, it's to like get more customers and like grow your ARR. But kind of the more important thing is that like, it's like you've created a recipe, like, or like you've concocted a hypothetical recipe. And now what you need to do is like bake that cake like a half dozen times or a dozen times, because every time you do it, you're gonna like get better at it, and then B, you're gonna start finding like bugs in it. Like, oh man, you know what? Like this amount of like it actually should be more flour, or it should actually be more chocolate chips. Or actually, I don't think people put chocolate chips in cake. Good job, Pete. You can see how much I bake. And so the idea here is like you want to do lots of repetitions of that, because what you're doing is you're rounding off the sharp edges from your sales motion, and then creating the materials that the people who come behind you, the people who are sellers, are going to or the kind of the non-founder sellers are going to be using. And so this is where you start getting a little bit of abstraction happening, where in order to kind of like accelerate your ability to iterate like that. So there's kind of two ways that you can abstract here. One approach is that you can get yourself a sales development rep to start doing the lead gen for you. So rather than you, like the founder, doing all these things, you get a little sales development rep helper to kind of fill your calendar, and then you're doing the selling and the success. Or this is kind of how I did this with Atrium when I was doing founder selling. You can kind of flip it around the other way, because like my sales leader and sales operations network is pretty solid. So it's not super hard for me to get meetings, so to speak. And so what I was able to do is like close business, but having a CSM who can be responsible for successing can kind of take that part of take that off of your plate, so to speak. So this is where we start doing a little bit of abstraction there. And so again, the thing that we're really focused on here is that we're kind of like, we're making tools for ourselves as we run into as we're doing these iterations, like, oh, this question keeps coming up, I should document the answer for that. In fact, actually, I should have a Google Doc of all the questions and the answers. In fact, I'll call them objection handles, right? Or, oh, you know what? This keeps coming up. I need to make a I need to make a slide on this in our sales deck, right? Or I need to have a sales deck in order to guide people through it. And so what you're doing here is you're kind of creating these assets for yourself to make yourself better. But what you're doing is you're creating the assets that the other folks coming behind you are going to use, right? And if you do that and think about that, like as you're building assets for yourself or building tools for yourself, that you like think about like, okay, I'm the first user right now, but there's going to be other users in the future. It'll make things way easier for you, such that when those other users, like your other sellers, show up, they're like, oh man, this deck is great. It's like, yeah, well, I made it for myself, but also I was thinking about the fact that you would be using it as well, right? And so kind of the stage at which you know that you're ready to exit this and kind of like progress to the next stage is you've got like a couple dozen customers, clear, repeatable, documented sales motion. The unit sales KPIs like win rate are pretty solid. And then of course the anti-pattern here will be having somebody else do it for you, right? So, all right, so that's the context there. Now we're going to talk about like scaling, right? And so the crux to initial scale is when you can first prove that someone who is not a founder can sell this thing, right? So we're going to talk about that. And so what this looks like now, it looks like an org chart because it is an org chart. And so what we're doing here is like previously it was this, right? An SDR plus a business founder or what have you. Now what we're going to have is we're going to add account executives, right? We're going to add sellers. And so ideally we're going to add 2. And then what we're going to do is they're going to start using, like what we're doing is we're going to teach them how to bake the cake. We're going to teach them how to bake the cookies, right? How to follow the recipe that you created in the previous stages, and then and get to the point where like they can autonomously bake cookies without your help, right? And so the interesting thing here is what like kind of the key activities that like the founder or the sales leader should be focusing on here is like the enablement of these folks right here, right? And this is where management, and then ideally data-driven management, starts coming to the fore here, because it's not about like you might have 50% win rates because like you're brilliant and awesome and like handsome and what have you, but like there's only 40 hours in a week or 50 hours in a week, and so you're never going to be able to scale up your ARR growth if you are the only one who's able to make the cookies, right? You're never going to be able to sell a lot of cookies if you're the only one who's able to bake them. And so that's why it's so critical that like at this stage what we're focused on here is proving that these guys and gals can do this. And so the things that you would be focused on here is using the tooling that was generated here, like that messaging and decks and demo and preso scripts and email outreach assets, using those tools in order to using those tools and teaching those folks how to use those tools in order to successfully turn leads into ops into close won customers, right? And so the time that that it's ready to go, right? That you're ready to exit this stage and then progress to the next stage is when you have one or more of these sellers who are engaging, presenting, and closing ideal customer profile customers at least as efficiently. I mean, like close to as efficient as you were, right? As the founder was, or the early sales leader, because then like if they're closing really inefficiently, then it's probably not appropriate to scale out because you'll be scaling out an inefficient sales motion. And so the goal here is once you get people to that level of success, then we know that it's time to go, right? The anti-pattern here, it's kind of tough, right? It's like I call it a Goldilocks scenario right here, where on the one hand, you don't want to hire too fast, right? Like, oh, I'm going to hire 3, 4, 5 reps to start. It's going to be pretty tough for you to get those folks to success if your attention as like a founder or an early sales leader is split amongst so many folks. So you'll kind of like never get those like pots to boil, if you will, because you're spreading your attention too broadly across folks. And then the other anti-pattern is kind of like an opportunity cost anti-pattern, where instead of like focusing on getting those initial AEs to success, you're continuing to as a founder or as a early stage sales leader, you're continuing to sell like too much, which is obviously sounds like kind of a silly sentence, but it actually is a problem, because instead of helping those individuals get to success themselves so they can be autonomous, instead you're selling or like doing the selling for them or what have you. And so again, you're only like, that's just, you're eating opportunity cost there, because what we need to package our sales motion in a way that we can get to 5, 10, 20, 80 reps in the future, right? So that's why this is like kind of a little bit of like a Goldilocks situation here. Cool. So before we kind of move on to some of the next sections here, I think one thing I kind of want to talk about is like what scaling actually means, because like people kind of like, they love to throw around like buzzwords and they don't really know what they mean. And so what we're going to talk about is like how sales organizations scale, and like what's and how it's related to the prior, like the importance of the prior kind of sections, and then also the importance of the kind of the subsequent sections that we're going to talk about. And so like the first thing that you need to understand about onboarding account executives is this concept of like ramping. And we actually do a pretty fun ramping like masterclass on this. But the important, and maybe we can drop the link in the chat here. But importantly, when a rep starts out, like they're upside down, right? They don't like, they're not generating money for the organization, right? They're consuming salary expense, but they're not yet generating close one business, bookings, et cetera, et cetera. And so at a certain point though, what ends up happening is like they start closing things, right? Like, they're consuming salary expense, consuming salary expense, consuming salary expense. And then right around here, like, oh, maybe I closed a deal, or maybe I closed a couple deals in this month. And then we get up here and it's like, oh, we actually closed like 2 deals or 3 deals or whatever. And so at a certain point, they're going to get to a point where like they're steady state. Like we're steady state and having success here. And like, that's pretty much like where you're at, because like it's not like a rep can continue to like close like more and more and more and more at a certain, like there's only 40 hours in a week. And so at a certain point, you're not going to be able to, like, you're going to cap out in terms of how many customer facing meetings you can have, et cetera, right? So this is kind of what this looks like in terms of like aggregate cash flow here, right? Like this is a payback period. And so then the funny thing is, like, this is a rep, right? Where like, maybe they're eating 15K of of cash a month. Like say you have a rep that like their OTE is, I don't know what that would be, like 160K OTE or something like that. Like this is how much they would cost you on a monthly basis. But then once they're to full success here, like you would net this and then say like it's a 60K a month quota, right? Like they net out the cap, or like the salary expense, and then like you're left with 45K of of contribution margin there, right? So then when you do this with like multiple folks, it's the same thing, but you just multiply it, right? So like this is an example of 4, like we're ramping 4 reps right here. And so when we hire a class of 4 reps, we're eating a bunch of salary expense, eating a bunch of salary expense, eating a bunch of salary expense. And then when they get to success, now they're throwing, money off into the business, right? They're adding ARR, right? And so this is actually where things kind of get magical, is that then once you've ramped this first class, you can add a second class, second cohort, right? And so what you can kind of see here is like we get up to here and like da 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 da, and then beep, we added 4 more people, and so now they are in their little ramp right here, and so we just and the kind of the process continues. It's the circle of life. And so what you can kind of see is like what this looks like is 9 cohorts of reps successfully onboarded every 4 months. This is probably, I mean, this would be like a pretty SMB like velocity motion right here. But after doing this 9 times over, you're getting to $1.6 million in like, contribution margin being added monthly, by those, I guess, what was that, like 40 reps or something? 9 times 4, hypothetical. But point is that like this is like how organizations scale, right? Like you add a new cohort of reps, get them successful. New cohort of reps, add them, get them successful. New cohort of reps, get them successful. And so this is like, so the funny thing is like we think about revenue graphs at like looking like this, but really what it is, it's like humans, right? So we're adding humans who then who get to success. And so that's how it ought to be done. And so then what we're going to talk about is like how it can be problematic if you don't ramp these folks quickly, right? And so as an example here, like the thing we were saying here is that these folks get to like full steady state success in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like month 6 there, because it's like that's where we get to that. Okay, well, what about if instead we only get there in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So 50% longer, or maybe 100% longer, right? Like maybe it takes us to 10 months or what have you. And so the problem with this is that it takes a lot longer for us to get to to positive contribution there. And so and the same kind of assuming that you're doing the same approach where you're adding incremental cohorts after the last cohort has gotten to success and you're not parallelizing cohorts, which is usually kind of a scary thing. This is kind of the difference here. Like these are 4-month cohorts right here. These are 8-month ramping cohorts. And so what you can see is like it's really powerful if you are more aggressive in, sorry, it is really powerful if you are able to get your your cohorts ramped up and successful faster, because then you can move on to the next cohort, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So this is essentially like this is how ramping works. Whoa. Right. This is how actual ramping works in the market. Wonderful. So, all right, Pete, like how do we do that? And so that's like the next stages here. Right? And so again, we're going from this right here, where we have our account executive selling alongside the founder seller, or the early sales leader. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create like a mini sales team here. And so what this looks like is we're getting out of the business of selling ourselves, and like sales manager or like as early stage sales leader, kind of the same situation here. And so what we've got is like this unit of revenue production is what I like to call this, right? So, here's our sales development rep. We've got our 2 AEs right here, and then we've got our customer success manager. And so, yours might be different. It might be 3 AEs to a CSM. It might be, 1 SDR to 3 AEs, or maybe 1-to-1 or what have you. But the point is that like you've got this unit of revenue production. And so the idea here is what we're doing is it's a little bit different, right? From this here, we were proving that these guys or gals could sell as effectively as this person. Now what we're doing is we're proving the cohesion of this unit, right? Like we can do lead gen and then get meetings on the calendar, which are then executed appropriately. And then it goes off to customer success, where they are success appropriately and they have success, and they are high NPS and they are high usage and they renew and so on and so forth, right? And so that's the focus of this stage right here. is this. And so now the idea here is like, as a founder or an early stage sales leader, you should largely be out of the business of day-to-day selling here, because what you're doing now is you're orchestrating and refining that that sales motion across this across this whole group here. And so the way that you know that you're ready to progress out of this is when that unit of revenue production is like consistently, right, like taking in leads, new meetings, turning them into customers, getting them to success. Like it's kind of like, where were we? It's kind of like this, right, where we're proving that we could like do this on a repeated basis, but in this case we're doing it with like a set of other people here, people doing the work. And so like that's how you know that like that you're ready to progress to the next step, like where it's smoothly happening, the balls aren't being dropped, that there are crisp handoff, right? Like SDRs, like this is a definition of a qualified opportunity you should get on a calendar, and this is not, and this is like this is lit. These are the meeting invites that the SDR sends, and like this is the follow-up that they do before the meeting to make sure that people attend it, and like these are and the AEs, like, and this is the no-show process, and right? All those sort of like handoffs and kind of like back checks. This is where you're going to start running into those and be like, uh-oh, we got to like fix this. Uh-oh, we got to fix this. Uh-oh, we got to fix that. Like the same on, oh, okay, when these close win, how do I get the information of the use cases, why the organization, like the customer bought, how do I get that, delivered to customer success, right? How does that handoff process work? And just kind of making sure that you have like these good kind of like bright lines and handoff situations. Because then once you do that, now we have like the right, like we've earned the right to be able to like max out this initial sales team here. And so and this is where things kind of get exciting, because if we do this, well then literally like we can just triple it or double it. And so what you'll notice is that each of these is the same kind of like unit here. And this is like obviously a simplified conception of this, but it's kind of the same thing, right? Like, cool, we know that our SDRs can feed calendars, the AEs can close, CS can get, can success people, get them to high NPS, get them to high usage, get them to value, get them documenting that value, et cetera, et cetera. And now we can just parallelize that here. And so this is kind of what this org chart kind of looks like here. This might be the point where you, maybe before this, but certainly here, this is the point at which professionalizing sales leadership can make sense, or ought to happen, right? Because now what we've done is like, hey, we've got like, in this situation right here, like we've proven that a mini sales team can work. So now we can get a professional sales manager or leader to like manage that team, right? And you also might consider adding sales operations at this point to kind of help the trains run on time. And so those things that I was talking about earlier, where we kind of find those like hinky kind of things that like, injure our ability to smoothly turn leads into opportunities, into customers, and get them to success. Well, having someone who spends a lot of their time and energy filing off those rough edges can be very helpful here. And so and I see that there's some questions coming in here, and I'm almost done, so I'll address these questions later. What's up, Nick? Howdy. So the exit criteria here is like, where again, like this is the point at which like we expand, and like things are always going to get like wobbly and like messed up. So like when you expand, like things will get weird, It's like, oh man, we don't have enough leads. The AEs like are only having 5 customer facing meetings a week. Like that sucks. That's not good, right? Like we need to ramp up our lead gen. Or alternatively, like, oh, okay, like, we added these account executives, and for whatever reason the new teams are not like ramping as quickly as the former teams were. Okay, we're not going to add more reps onto that and kind of like compound that issue. What we need to do is just make sure that everybody is having sufficient success, because then what we're going to do is we're going to double it up again, right? Clone it out in order to get to the next unit of scale. But you don't, like, generally speaking, you don't want to double up the same way that we didn't want to double up from this to this until you know that the existing thing is working. And so we need to make sure that this thing is working, and then in order to then jump up to the next stage here. And so this is where things get really interesting, because like this is like real kind of like big kid scale right here. I mean, this is like what this is what Atrium sales organization looks like. I wouldn't call us necessarily like super big kids, but like, yeah, I mean, I guess we're okay. And because like this is where you can start cooking with gas, and like you're adding a bunch of ARR on a recurring basis here. The other thing that you're doing here is you're layering in management, right? So whereas here you had potentially all of these folks directly reporting to this person right here, there's no way you could do this with this. It would be bananas. And so probably now what you're doing is you're layering in a new set of management. And so then the things that are really important here, whereas like maybe here, this is where you started maybe like layering in more data and metrics, like management by metric, to your organization. Because like you're probably getting to the edges of where you can like manage by just kind of like, being CC'd on everything or riding along on all the calls. I mean, certainly you wouldn't be able to do that at this scale. You could kind of fake it here. When you get here, this is where like you essentially have a revenue factory here. And so what you need to do is instrument the revenue factory in order to make sure that the different parts of the assembly line and kind of the different machines, so to speak, are having success. And so this right here and this right here is where it becomes extraordinarily important to start investing in like data-driven management capacity, because you're just not going to be able to, like, that's the way that you're going to know that you're ready to double up, is understanding like, oh, like, here, like, are my AEs fully utilized, right? Like, okay, well, what's their customer facing meeting volume on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Oh, well, I kind of have to know that metric in order to make a judgment that they're fully utilized. Like, I can't just like look on their calendars. Or how many opportunities are they able to concurrently manage? Or what is their win rate on new opportunities that come into their pipeline? Or what is like or, oh man, what is where are the issues in conversion rates for this AE right here, who's under attaining as compared to all the other account executives? Because now I want to investigate and fix that, because until I can fix my AEs, I can't get to this next level of scale, right? And then when you get here, this is where like process and operating rhythm, this is essentially like all the all the resources, all the master classes that I normally do are very much targeted at this stage of organization right here, this stage of organization right here, where it's like, this is where we need to make sure we have a good operating rhythm, to make sure like that these managers are having productive data-driven one-on-ones with these folks. This is where it's important that as a leader, you're doing a good job of being a data-driven sales leader and paying attention to the metrics that are important for you, but then also systematizing the consumption of that information down here. Maybe we can drop a link to the data-driven sales leader masterclass. I actually don't know if I can't remember when I've done when I did that one, but like pretty much all the master classes that we do is like focus on, like, this is the point at which you really need to up your sales management game, because you just like, you have this machine, this revenue factory that requires excellent management here. And so when you do that, then you kind of go off to like the next step here is, I mean, this is like a Series B or maybe later sales organization here. When you get to this stage right here, like the next step after that is is even more scale. But at this point, like you're on your merry way. Like Jason Lemkin kind of talks about this. Like, look, if you can get to $5 million of ARR, you can definitely get to $10 million of ARR. If you can get $10 million of ARR, you probably can get to $100 million in ARR. And so you're on your merry way. Cool. So those are the slides we want to cover here. I'm going to get into questions here because I've been seeing it like popping into the corner of my eye. I'm like, wonderful. So Tanima, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, has this great question. How do you balance the move from founder sales to focusing on hiring and onboarding AEs with continue to maintain sales momentum during your shift? Super frustrating, yeah, like super tough, situation there. I think it's like this spot is what we're talking about. I think that it's tough. And it's one of those things where you have to be disciplined about it, because it like this is kind of this right here. If you don't sufficient, like it's okay if you take a little bit of a hit, like an ARR growth hit, because what you're doing is you're redirecting your time energy to successfully onboarding these folks right here. Like that's way more important than just you can like that is a worthwhile investment for you to take the foot off the gas a little bit in order to make it such that you can add these two more engines. It can be tough, but it's really important, right? It's the only way you're going to be able to scale. So then Nick has a fun question here. Is there a normal ratio between the groups one SDR to two AEs to one CSM? It kind of like depends on like the economics of your sales motion. Like this is a fairly standard ratio. Where did it go? Come back. There we go. This is a fairly standard ratio right here. Like one SDR to account executives. It's kind of it's contingent on how many SDRs you have feeding AEs. It's contingent on how hard it is to get customer facing meetings on the calendar for the SDRs, right? If you're in a really competitive environment, where there's like lots of attention or like lots of competition for the attention of your potential buyers, you might need a richer ratio here as an example. If you have like a very hands-on implementation process, or maybe like a fussy product that's kind of like hard to use, maybe valuable but like hard to use, you might have a richer relationship between customer success managers and account executives. So that's kind of the sitch there. And then Barrett has a question. How often should the founder be on the sales calls with the first AE? 80% of the time, second AE 60% of the time. I mean, I think essentially what you want to do is like early on, and I don't know if we actually have, there's a chapter in Founding Sales that talks about sales onboarding. So actually I'll just grab the link here, such that you can look at that. Let me grab this and I'll just drop this in the chat here for you. Like at the beginning, you should be on all the calls, right? Like after you've onboarded somebody and you've taken them through, mock presentation and mock demo, and you've demo certified them, or pitch certified them, disco certified them, demo certified them. So that's the first step. And then they have like live contact with the customer. In those situations, you're going to want to be on pretty much all those calls to start, right? And then once they get to the point where they're like comfortable doing it on their own, now you can get to the point where like maybe you're listening to their calls, like you're using Chorus or Gong or what have you to like dip into their calls, listen to them on like 1.5x, right? So like that's the kind of the next thing. And so what you want to do is like release control as kind of the early indications of success start kind of looking more positive there. Cool. And then let's see, other questions here. Just scanning through the chat. I think those are all the questions here. So yeah, so hopefully this is the first time I've done this prezo for MSP, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If folks want to get a copy of Founding Sales, what's up, Angelica? If folks want to get a copy of Founding Sales and coffees for closers, mug. We're going to go ahead and drop a link to that here. You can also scan the QR code there. All we ask as a, in exchange is a quick discovery chat around how you use data in your, in your current sales organization in order to improve performance there. So I think that's everything there. Angelica, did I miss anything?
No, you covered it all. Thank you so much, Pete, for an informative session on how to scale your revenue org from your first hire to 20 reps. So thank you everyone for attending today's session. Don't forget to get a copy of Founding Sales and your Yeti offer. We added in the sign up link. Also, sign up for Atrium. It takes 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes actually. So I'm going to drop the link as well there to sign up. And stay tuned for the recording and the awesome slide deck that Pete shared with us today. And you'll get that copy at the MSP previous event page, as well as an email shortly from MSP. See you at the next event.